Welcome to Citrus County Library System C4Con. We're so happy you're here. We are kicking off our panels or sessions today with Scarier Than Comics, Florida Ghost Stories, and it's being hosted by Chris Balzano.
I know, I'm not much of a Star Wars fan.
Is this supposed to be the Star Wars?
No, that was my mom, sorry.
Chris Balzano is the author of Haunted Ocala National Forest and Haunted Florida Love Stories, making him a foremost expert on Florida's spookiest stories.
All right.
Prepare to learn about Florida folklore and ghost stories that are even scarier than fiction. Be sure to grab 2 raffle tickets from either Greg or I on your way out, because you get 2 raffle tickets for being in here. If you start feeling snackish today, check out the food truck parked on the side of the building near the garden. Be sure to follow Citrus County Libraries on social media to see updates about what's going on during the event for today. And tag us in any photos that you post throughout the event. Finally, don't forget to swing by Chris's vendor booth to learn more about his book, his work, or to purchase a book. Thank you for being here, and without further ado,
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm gonna make one more grammar correction. She said make sure to purchase the book, and there are multiple books.
Oh,
so I'm just gonna say purchase all of my books. Just so let's add an S to that. Thank you guys very much for coming. It's kind of intimidating to be the first presentation of the day, but also to be, originally when they asked me to come, I do have a book. My most recent book is Haunted Ocala National Forest. And so it was natural that when they do events in the Ocala, especially near Halloween time, I do a lot of work, I come out and stuff like that. If you guys in the back can't hear me, get closer. I'm just playing. So it's natural, but it's also kind of like, I'm not a Mandalorian, I'm not Pokemon, I'm not, so where do I fit in this? And as she was saying, like, okay, as what's his name comes in, where do I fit in this? And there obviously are horror comics, right? I mean, I'm wearing one that's in the EC style. If you guys are familiar with those comics, it's not just Marvel and DC out there. Old school things like Tales from the Crypt. But then I started thinking about it more, and I was like, I think there's a very natural connection between ghost stories and comic books. I think they fill the same thing in our lives. I think they touch upon the same themes. I think that they impact us the same way. They have the same kind of like, and so I was like, well, that's going to be my connection. That's going to be what I talk to these people about, because when you really look at these ghost stories, they are living, breathing, fire, around the fire kind of comics that we tell, and it's a natural fit between the two of them. Let me tell you a little bit about what I do. I've been doing this since 1994. When all of that useless knowledge that I had in my head from spending hours at the library, that was my babysitter growing up, I knew every single ghostly legend you can imagine. I had heard every ghost story, I had read scary stories to tell in the dark, and this great book called Strangely Enough, and it was all just in there. And I read so much that eventually the librarians in the kids section got like annoyed with me and made me go up into the adult section. So I'm in 4th grade reading Stephen King. I actually got suspended in 5th grade for reading Stephen King in class because there were swears in it. When I got to college, I had never had a paranormal experience. That's for everyone's first question. What got you into this? They assume that I had ghosts roaming the halls of my childhood home. That was not me. I was totally an academic about it. And then, as I got into college at Emerson in Boston, I was in the most haunted building in Boston. Was my college dorm. And so all these unexplained things were happening, all these crazy things were happening, and I'd say to people, well, what do you think is causing it? And they'd say, well, I heard there was a woman from when this was a hotel, and she would only go out at 3 o'clock. I live in Boston, nothing's open at 3 o'clock. She would go out at 3 o'clock to go grocery shopping, and then she died. And I was like, wait a minute, I've heard that same exact story about a university in Wyoming and Ohio State University, like this. And so I became obsessed with this idea of what I call the crossroads, the intersection of where a true haunting plays with the stories that we tell about it. Who here believes in ghosts? So, well, that's actually a high percentage. What I say is we can debate whether ghosts are real or not, but a ghost story is always true because we tell it, right? And it rings within us. Over that time, I then became a paranormal investigator. I literally wrote the book on paranormal investigating. I've got 2 books that focus just on that. And then it began to feel empty. We were gathering all of this evidence, and we weren't doing anything with it, right? We weren't trying to prove anything. Like, we weren't convincing people that weren't going to be convinced. And I was like, this is not for me. And I put the entire thing down. I decided to come back with what's called legend tripping. So legend tripping is more concerned with experience over evidence. So I hear a haunted legend in a small town. I go and I research as much as I can about the history of that town. I try to make some kind of connection between the story that people tell and the history and what the people are like there. And then my partner and I go out and we try to experience the haunting exactly as it sounds in the book, or exactly how people in the town tell it, right? Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes we get to a place and we realize that, oh, this is supposed to be haunted because it looks that way, or something like that. And oftentimes we experience something that's extremely profound, but has nothing to do with the story. And we say, wow, when something spooky happens, when something paranormal happens, and I never try to prove anything wrong, we don't know how to process it, right? If we are woke up in the middle of the night and there's a ghost standing over our bed, that doesn't happen all the time. So we have to, you would be excited by it, but it doesn't happen all the time. So we have to process it in our brains. When we process it in our brains, we have to fall back on stories that we know. I have a book called Haunted Florida Love Stories. You would not believe how many ghosts there are in Florida that sound exactly like the plot of Romeo and Juliet.
Oh boy.
Including one about half hour away from here in Ocala at Fort Case. So I was like, all right, these are great stories. I want to make sure I tell them, but themes come across all the time. So let's talk about how are ghost stories like comic books. The first is kind of obvious. You have to have a hero, right? Even if it's an anti-hero, right? Comic books are driven by the idea that someone can overcome something.
Like Batman.
Like, exactly, there you go, exactly like Batman. This is probably one of the most heroic men that has ever lived in Florida. Just so you know, I am a folklorist, okay? If you see me go like this, it's because I have the facts here, because I often forget the facts, because the story is more important. This is Marshal John Bowman right here. Marshal John Bowman was brought to Punta Gorda, Florida in 1903 to clean up the town. It was an absolutely horrible town, well before the Prohibition. DeSoto County, and especially Punta Gorda, they were dry counties. You weren't supposed to drink at all. It was also basically the crossroads of all alcohol going to Southwest Florida. So they needed someone to come in and clean up the town. Marshal John Bowman is buried in Indian Springs Cemetery. Indian Springs is so ridiculously popular. Every single time I've gone there, and I've gone there at 8 o'clock in the morning, I've gone there at noontime, I've gone there at night. Every time I go there, there is someone looking for ghosts. And it's hilarious because my 9-year-old daughter, she was 9 at the time, would take people on tours because we went there to take pictures. And she's like, let me tell you about Marshal John Bowman. One of the most heartbreaking ghosts that are there, or series of ghosts really, is this when James Sandlin built it in 1868, he had the idea, he had all this land, and he wanted to make sure that no person could be without a grave. So there's a section of graves that are essentially paupers' graves, and he would allow them to be buried for free. And then there's a huge section, if this were bigger you could see, there's a huge section where there are literally hundreds of small children buried. So keep in mind, the mortality rate was crazy low, right? So there were a lot of babies who were dying. You could be born in this patch of the cemetery if you were from the moment of birth to 5 years old. If your parents couldn't afford it, you could be buried in here. And so obviously, like places all across the country, it got the name Babyland. Babyland has dozens of headstones. It has hundreds of kids buried there, but dozens of headstones. because this seems to be the focal point for every hurricane that goes through Southwest Florida. If you can, and I really can't see that picture, but there's actually a fence that goes all around it now from not from Ian, but from what was the one before Ian? No, Irma, from Irma. Irma destroyed a lot of the headstones that were there, because most of them were nothing more than pieces of wood stuck into the ground. Babyland has been known to have ghosts that like to play with each other. So if you go to this cemetery at night, you'll see all these balls of light. We can call them ghost lights, we can call them orbs, and they rise from the ground and they float around the cemetery. Yes?
Would you also call them kitsunebi?
I've never heard that expression.
Foxfire.
I call them taipaiwunkas, because that's the Wampanoag word for them. They are the souls of these children, right? And you might think that they are swamp gas or something like that, like one of the traditional scientific, no offense to science, reasons for it. But these balls go up in the air, they play with each other, they do leapfrog over each other, and if it was just swamp gas, or cemetery gas, what explains all the little children that are seen running through that park in the daytime? So it's definitely one of the most haunted parts of that cemetery, and yet it's not the most intriguing one in that area. Someone is protecting those children. At nighttime, this dark figure, really tall, thin, walks back and forth along the outer edge of Babyland. It's almost like Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. He gets to one part, and he's sent to like pivot, and then he walks the other way. And people have reported him for decades. Marshal John Bowman is also buried there. He was brought in to clean up the town, like I said. He was a little too good at his job because he basically stopped the bootlegging almost altogether. He loved three things in this world. He loved catching criminals, he loved cigars, and he loved his children. So it's kind of ironic that one night, as he's sitting at his kitchen table, he literally has two kids in each arm. He's a big man, two kids in each arm, and is smoking a cigar. Someone shot him through his kitchen window. Right? His next door neighbor bursts in, and he's like, I will save you, I will save. He can't save him. He's like, that's it, I will catch your killer no matter what happens. I will bring your killer to justice. That killer was Isaiah Cooper. Thinks no one in the history of Charlotte County. This is the man who was convicted of the murder, but everyone knows he didn't do it. It was kind of a joke that everyone even had of it. No one thought that Isaiah Cooper actually done it. He was kind of seen running kind of near the area. He was an outsider to the town, which was big, and someone had overheard him say once, I'm gonna kill you, Marshal John Bowman, which in Florida in 1903 was enough to get you sentenced to death. He actually, at that time, the counties were together, so they built the gallows. They didn't have enough gallows built. They built the gallows. He was sentenced to die. The day he was sentenced to die was only a few hours away. They said, nope, you're not going to die today. Just like a great novel like To Kill a Mockingbird, all the people from Punta Gorda who loved Marshal John Bowman stormed the courthouse. They were totally planned on taking him out and hanging him anyway. I always love this story. Then the train whistle blew, and they were like, oh, I guess we gotta go home. And they all just walked right back to the train and went. So, Isaiah Cooper goes through this a few more times. He finally is sentenced to death. They're gonna carry it out. He's once again hours away from being killed. And the new governor, his very first act coming in, right? His very first act as governor was he communed the sentence, and he sentenced Isaiah Cooper. He switched it from death to life imprisonment. That new governor was Albert Gilchrist, who was the same man who was holding Marshal John Bowman and said, I will get revenge on your death, I will avenge you. He let the killer go. In what is a great twist of fate that can only happen near the Ocala National Forest, Isaiah Cooper is brought to a prison camp in DeLand, and he escapes through the swamp. And when they asked the guard, like, what happened, why didn't you stop him? And he said, I had no shoes, I didn't want to get them dirty. So no one knows what actually happens to Isaiah Cooper. But Marshall John Bowman is buried. He has no money. The headstone that is there for him was donated by a group that he belonged to. Once he died, his wife and his 5 kids all moved out of Punta Gorda and moved back to Wauchula, Florida, which is where they were from. This is one of the saddest headstones that you're ever going to see. It's beautiful, it's decorated. Every time I go there, I leave cigars for him. But there is nothing around. There are no other headstones, there's no other family members, it's just him and a whole bunch of land. The only thing that is even close to where Marshall John Bowman is buried is Babyland. With its really tall, dark spirit that seems determined to protect the children who are buried there. So could that be Marshall John Bowman doing the same exact thing that he did in life, in death? Could that be him walking back and forth, making sure those kids are protected the way he can't protect his kids in life? Who wants to go with me? It's only about an hour and a half from here. It's right off 75, right behind a Walmart of all things.
Do I get to bring an electric guitar and play the Justice League Unlimited theme for
You
him?
can play whatever you want. Actually, there are several ghosts there that love this. So you have to have a hero. But if you have a hero, you have to have a villain. What is a good story without a villain? And what better villain than the killer from Jeepers Creepers? How many of you guys have seen the movie Jeepers Creepers? I love being here because people go, I guess I maybe have heard of it. How many of you knew it was shot less than a half hour from where you are? See, once again, right? It was shot in the town of? See, even you guys mispronounce it. You say it different ways. If I say Dunellen, people say it's Dunellen. If I say Dunellen, they say it's Dunellen. I have heard it's Dunellen. Did you know that it was inspired by a true story?
Oh boy.
Okay, you didn't know this? So, in 1990, a guy by the name of Dennis Depew, who was an absolutely horrible man. It was Easter morning, and as his kids were opening up their Easter baskets, he was an abusive man. He started to beat his wife. He felt bad that he was doing it in front of kids ruining their Easter, so he dragged his wife out of the house, brought her to the local church, continued the beating to the point where he killed her and then dumped her in a nearby well. This couple coming home from, that looks like him right there. This couple coming, am I kidding? Look at back there. This couple coming home from church saw it and they were freaked out. Now there's no cell phones back then, so they started taking off. They were going to call like the local authorities from, and he pulls out in his car and he starts like ramming them. He starts trying to run them off the road, and finally he figures he can't catch them. He pulls off one way, they pull off the other. So if you've ever actually seen Jeepers Creepers, that is what the story is based on, right? Like that's the first half hour of the movie is what I just described. In Jeepers Creepers, you find out that it's a man who every 23 years is allowed to come up and he's allowed to feast on people. So he eats some people, he saves some people for later because you get hungry over 23 years, and then other people he kind of tears off body parts that he likes of theirs and replaces his own. So he's like, wow, I really like that nose, takes off and replaces it. That doesn't happen, right? That doesn't happen here. What has happened here is they believe there is a curse on this area. There's a curse where that famous shot, if you've seen it at the beginning, where they seem to be like Fred Flintstone driving the same stretch of road for like 20 minutes. That stretch of road leads into the town. It is the town that does, it's called Tiger Trail Road, or Tiger Tail Road, I should say. Tiger Trail Road, not Tiger Tail. It's Southwest 80th Street. It's named after the local high school. The local high school are the Tigers. And so it's Tiger Trail Road, but everyone thinks it's Tiger Tail Road. When Victor Salvo, who was the writer and director of Jeepers Creepers, when he heard that story, he was like, well, where can we go with it? Took him years to write the screenplay, took him years to get the movie made from when he first heard the story to when he finally got to, because he was spending most of that time in jail. The people who, do you guys know this part of the story? Okay. The people who made the movie, the people who financed the movie, didn't know this when they hired him to do it, when they finally stopped. They didn't know until they started to actually shoot, because they had to. I have never been interrupted by Jawas before in my life. You guys are awesome. There you go. That's actually my phone notification, so I thought my kids were messaging me. They discovered that they weren't allowed to shoot exactly where they wanted to shoot, because Victor Salvo had to be 500 miles or 500 feet from the school. Without me saying, can we guess what he was convicted of?
Yes.
So, because of that, they say that, thank you, have a good one. Because of that, they say there's actually a curse on this area. The shoot itself had a ton of mishaps happen. They had like mysterious deaths, they had mysterious lighting things that happened. There was one place, you know you're in the Ocala when they went to film the stuff for the slaughterhouse, and it was so disgusting for what had really happened there that they had to clean it up to make it suitable slaughterhouse for the movie. While they were shooting, they was known they would have to fire off guns because the insects in Florida were so bad. They would have to fire the guns off and then shoot for like 20 minutes while they waited for the bugs to come back. So any of those things could be potentially reasons. Now, what happens on this stretch of road, right? I mean, not less than 200 feet from the high school, is people who are driving there at night say that they see these little kids crossing the road. These little kids shouldn't be out that late. They also have black eyes. So if you've ever heard of black-eyed kids, that's where they are. They're at, regardless of how you pronounce it, they're in Dublin, right? Now, they kind of try to trick you. If you know anything about black-eyed kids, you know they're not really kids at all. And the #1 rule is, do not let them into your house. Here on Tiger Trail Road, they might have found a loophole, because what they do is 2 of them distract you by appearing in the middle of the road, and then when you stop, because you don't want to hit them, a 3rd one taps on your window and asks to be let into your car. As a rule of thumb, if you're on a somewhat deserted road at night, do not let the kid with black eyes in.
Don't pick up hitchhikers!
Now, one of the things that happens, though, is that if you are driving on that stretch of road, and it is a certain time of night, can anyone guess what time of night it is? Yes?
3 a.m.
3 a.m., exactly. The only reason why I asked him is because I knew that he was, what were you saying, 666? Oh, okay, I like the way you think. If you're driving on that stretch of road between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and you have no one in your back seat, the black-eyed kids will actually appear in your car. If that happens, no matter what you do, don't talk to them. By the time you get off that stretch of road, they'll just kind of vanish. But whatever you do, don't talk to them. It's the same as engaging them. I noticed, I've been tracking this legend since before I wrote my Haunted Ocala, before I even really knew what the Ocala was. There is a movie that was made in 2018 called Butterfly Kisses. Butterfly Kisses show, it's like a found footage one, so it's kind of like Blair Witch. And it's all about if you go to this one train bridge, and you look down it and you don't blink at 3 o'clock, if you don't blink for an entire hour, all of a sudden a monster named Peeping Tom will appear at the end of the bridge. Every time you close your eyes, he'll get closer and closer and closer. Since 2018, that also has been happening here on Tiger Trail Road. So if you drive by the high school, you go a little bit further, and you turn out your lights, you turn off the engine of the car, you turn on your lights, you'll see on the far end of the road, there's a dark figure, what they call a dark man with a hat. It looks actually a lot like Jeepers Creepers, is off in the distance. If you turn your lights off, put your lights on, he'll be a little bit closer. If you turn your lights off, you turn your lights on, closer, 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 until he actually has his hand on the hood of your car. If that happens, if you were to do it, turn him off one more time, he'll kill you. He'll appear in the car and kill you. So don't do that. That's a bad idea. Hey, the other bad idea is to actually try to take off. If you take off, it doesn't help. He will continue to follow you. Instead, what you have to do is once you get freaked out that he's way too close, you turn the car on again, shut it off, you put on your high beams, you turn them on, you turn them off, he's a little bit further away. You turn him on, turn him off, he's a little further away. Turn him on, turn him off, he's a little further away. Until you can't see him anymore. Then do it like 12 more times just to be safe, and you can drive off. Yes?
If I ever see that guy, I'm hitting the gas and I'm running the sucker over.
Just so you know, I'm going to engage your question. It's almost impossible to kill any of these haunted hitchhikers. They're all throughout Florida. People drive through them all the time. It does nothing to them, and it usually does nothing to you either. Great comic books feature impossible acts, right? This might be Superman flying backwards to change time. It might be running through, well, actually a lot of it has to do with time, but you get what I'm saying. Superheroes can do things that we can't even imagine. One of the things in Florida that you can do, which is impossible, is to go to Coon Hill Cemetery, climb up on the wall, and walk all the way around the edge of the cemetery. No one is able to do it. Not now. Later, you can check out YouTube to watch these people try it, right? They get on to the wall, they walk across, and first thing they feel is someone tugging at their pants, right? Then, as they go a little bit further, they start to hear this weird whispering, this moaning coming from the cemetery, telling them to get off, get off, get off, right? Then eventually, if they can make their way around, like the second turn, unseen hands push them into the woods. No one can make their way all the way around the cemetery. This takes place in Chumacala, Florida, which is what the town is known as now. I can mispronounce that because I guarantee none of you guys are from there or even know the town. It's a small little town. When it was originally founded in the 1820s, it was called, they had two choices. They had either Possum Hill or Coon Hill for a name, but there were so many raccoons that they went with Coon Hill. That was in 1820. By the 1900s, the town had gone completely under. Over that time, they had built this cemetery, and this is where they buried all their dead from that area. Back in the day, it had no wall, it had no fence, it had no iron gate. It was just an open field where they buried people. Around 1900, the town starts to go under. They decide that they're going to move it. In a very Florida thing, they actually tear up their houses and take the wood with them to Alabama, where most of them end up setting up. And the town of Chickamauga kind of takes over things. But before these people left, they decided to build this cemetery and to put a wall around this cemetery. There was no iron gate at the time. The question becomes, why? Why would they build this wall? Now, your first initial reaction is that they're trying to protect the headstones out of there. That wall is not high enough to keep anything out. When they left for Alabama, they didn't have that iron fence, and they didn't have a gate that closed it. It was left open. But for some reason, they felt the need to build that wall. Weird whisperings started to happen. They weren't trying to keep things inside the cemetery or outside the cemetery from coming in. They were trying to keep things inside of the cemetery. If you read kind of legends from that area, they'll tell you that while this is like kind of a sacred area, like right, it was a burial spot, there was something weird and dark that was in the woods in that area. They actually thought that there was a curse on the people who were buried in that plot of land, which is why they stopped. Some people even tell you, some histories of the town tell you, it was that dark thing that drove them out of the town. It had nothing to do with the fact that the railroad went a different way. It had everything to do with the fact that there was this dark spirit, some kind of dark force, which caused the town to fail, and its home was inside that wall. So, as they left, they fenced it in, they tried to keep the evil contained. They felt somehow, I guess they didn't need a gate to do that. And since then, people have been talking about walking around, and those things push you. Because they can't get out, they're pissed off, and they don't want you to come in. The weird thing is if you go by just mere numbers, based on size, this is the most vandalized cemetery in all of Florida. Ouch. Everybody kind of feels that maybe it has something to do with the name, that it's like offensive somehow, and so people get mad, and so they try to destroy things. It's impossible to tell exactly why, but pretty much you can't get to this cemetery because the police are protecting it, right? The people all around town were like kind of look after it and things like that because it gets vandalized so much. So it still has like a little bit of an obsession with the people. But if you can make it through the woods, and if you can find where it is, then maybe you can make your way around. And if you do, make sure you film that and send it to me because you'll be one of the first ones. Oddly enough, do you remember Cullen Crane? It was his job to protect this cemetery for a few years because he was a deputy in that area. So, sorry, we were just sharing a moment between us. Yes.
Has anyone ever suffered from the Coon Hill log jam? I'm talking if they slip and go.
No, they get like, and even when I say they get pushed, they don't get like, oh no, I fell. They get like pushed off, like like a force actually forces them off. It's not even like just like they trip or something. Then you have timeless themes and news stories. So I was talking before about Romeo and Juliet. Here's a great example of that, and that is the legend of the Coyote Woman in the town of Rosewood in Lake County.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
I'm being very specific about all these things that I'm saying. This is the story of the Coyote Woman.
Ow!
Thank you. In Rosewood in Lake County. Now, if anyone here was born and has lived in this area the entire time, some bells should already start ringing in your head. So the story goes that there was this young girl who lived in the town of Rosewood in Lake County who fell in love with someone, and her parents, especially her father, didn't want this to happen at all. It didn't have so much to do with the fact that she was 12 and he was 17. It had to do with the fact that they were white and he was African American. And that was not going to fly. So originally they were going to like move her out of the town, but the mom was like, no, I love my daughter, I want her with me. And so they decided to stay. And so this girl would escape from her house, and her boyfriend would escape from his house, and they would very romantically meet in the cemetery and do nothing but talk.
So to speak.
And
I don't buy that for one iota.
As it happens, right? They kind of make plans to get married and things like that. Unfortunately, the father finds out about this. She is sneaking back into the house. He kind of puts two and two together. The next day, he goes to the center of town. That's Rosewood in Lake County, and he finds the man and he starts to beat him right there on the streets, right? As he's doing that, no one is helping this guy, right? As a matter of fact, a crowd forms and they start cheering him on to beat him. And everyone, all the African Americans in the area are totally freaked out. They're not going to do anything. They're backing off. They won't do anything until he finally drags him off into the woods. Some of the stories say that this was that he actually killed him and buried him in a shallow grave in the woods. Other people say the man was just so freaked out that he left town completely. Whatever happened, she kind of started to hear whispers about this later in the day. She went down to the town and she could literally see the blood of the man she loved on the sidewalks. And she's asking people, what happened, what happened? And they're kind of like turning their eyes away from her, they're embarrassed. And she's like, no, you've got to tell me what happened, what happened? And then the people finally tell her and she's like, well, why didn't you help her? And now everyone's feeling completely guilty. And she's like, I hate this town, I hate all of you people, like you never, this is an injustice. She goes home, she goes to her father's nightstand and she grabs his gun, and she waits, and when her father comes home, she says the name of the man she loves, and she shoots him twice and kills him. And now she's standing there in the kitchen, she's got the gun in her hand, her father's dead, she knows her mom is coming home, she completely freaks out. And so she goes to the only place for her that's comfort. She runs out of the house and she goes to the cemetery. She's in the cemetery, the sun is setting, it's nighttime, and she just starts to cry. She starts to cry. As she's crying, a pack of coyotes starts circling the cemetery. She starts crying harder, it's now like a full, they're circling faster and faster and faster. And now she is screaming. She's screaming with the grief of not only the man she's lost, but the murder she's committed. She's screaming, and the coyotes are howling louder and louder and louder. And she lies down on top of one of the graves, puts the gun to her head, and commits suicide. But she doesn't die. Instantly, her body starts to transform into a coyote. It takes over her whole body. Now keep in mind, she's not howling, she's still screaming. She leaps out of the cemetery into the pack, and they go away. And all you can hear is the howl of a coyote, of all these coyotes, and underneath it, a woman's scream. If you go to this area of Florida today, you can still, if you're in the woods, hear something you won't find anywhere else in the Ocala. You will hear the howl of a coyote, and underneath it, a scream of a woman. Now, there is so much about that story that is not true. Okay? Let's forget about the fact that the person who told me this story, and then I confirmed it with others, heard it from his grandfather, who had heard it earlier than that. He used to hear it walking down the path, right? Walking down this path on the way to the pond that was there. His grandfather would always spot out and tell him where the cemetery is, right? And he would tell this story and stuff like that. And he told it as if it were fact. Coyotes have only been in Florida since 1970, right? Not even close to when this story is supposed to have taken place. Also, and this is a big one, there is no such town as Rosewood, Florida in Lake County, and there never has been. I am good friends, and I do a lot of research to the Astor Library, and they've told me, like, we've done all this research, there is no such town, there never has been. There is a Rosewood, Florida. Can anyone tell me about Rosewood, Florida?
It's an awful story, we don't want to.
Okay, so the Rosewood is actually located in, I always get this wrong, that's why you have to look it up, in Levy County. And it was, if you can imagine, To Kill a Mockingbird mixed with a massacre, right? So it's essentially like one of the darkest moments of racial history in Florida, where a miscommunication and then like serving warrants and then kind of like inflamed things, they basically caused the entire African American town of Rosewood to be burned to the ground and over 100 people killed, right? So maybe because this story has a racial undertone to it, maybe that's like where they change it to Rosewood. If you are looking for this cemetery, the cemetery is there sometimes. If you are looking for this cemetery, it's actually in the town of Paisley, Florida, right? The name of the cemetery is Shockley, because that area used to be known as Shockley, not Rosewood, either Paisley or Shockley. And the cemetery itself now has a fence that's all around it. I understand. What did he mean? I have gone to see this cemetery 3 times, and like many cemeteries in the Ocala National Forest, sometimes it's just not there. How many of you guys live near here? Like you live near the forest? Okay. One of the things when I started doing stories about this, people would tell me about the shift. I call it the shift. They just call it whatever. In other words, you could be somewhere in the woods and the path goes to the left all the time, except for on Thursdays. Sometimes on Thursdays it goes to the right. Or the cemetery that is right behind your house, that's over 100 years old, sometimes that cemetery isn't there. It goes somewhere. There are these weird shifts, whether they're time shifts or actual dimensional shifts, that happen all the time that people report. And I see some of your faces, because you're from this area, kind of know what I'm talking about. You have hunters that'll mark something on their GPS, right? These are people who, they put a stand right there. They want to tell other people this is a good spot. They'll go there. None of those that stand gone. It'll return a few days afterwards. Like, so in other words, the next time they go, it's there, and it's as if it's been untouched. So that cemetery is sometimes there, sometimes not. So it's an urban legend, right? It's a weird story. There are no coyotes. There are no, the town itself didn't exist except for the fact that the people of Paisley, Florida, the teenagers of Paisley, Florida, to them, this story is 100% true. Because if you want to prove your manhood, if you're a teenage boy and you want to prove your manhood, you go with your friends to that cemetery. You lie on one of the graves, you cross your arms like this, and you repeat Coyote Woman 3 times, yeah, do that, right? And you'll start to hear a weird howling. Now, if you know anything about coyotes, they don't circle, right? They're not like that kind of animal. There are coyotes in the area. You'll start to hear them circling the cemetery. You'll start to hear them circling, you'll start to hear them howling, and underneath that howl, you'll hear the scream of a woman. And it gets louder, and it gets louder, and it gets louder, and if you're the last one in the cemetery, if you're the last one who doesn't freak out and leave, you win. Because it said the Coyote Woman in that area, right, she still stalks the woods, she still looks for men who do bad things. So all you males, if you're going to go to anywhere near Paisley, Florida, make sure that you, like, I don't know, go to confession first, or make sure you do what you're supposed to do, because she's still out there. She's still looking to avenge the man she loved. And according to the teenagers in the town of Paisley, her ghost is very much real. Might have something to do with why there are so many missing people that are reported in that area as well.
I'd like to help her out if I could.
There you go.
Go there, go to the cemetery, cross your arms, report back to us what happens. But then there's also the idea of the story is told differently. So if we're looking at it like this, and you're on the right side of the Ocala National Forest, and you're a bad man, you might have to contest with the Coyote Woman, who might make you disappear, who might abduct you, something like that. If you are on this side of the Ocala, however, where we are now, you might instead have to deal with the Stachini. And the Stachini are much worse. Okay, now, this is the teacher in me. Can anyone here tell me about the Dade Massacre? Does anyone here know about the Dade Massacre?
I've been here 6 years and I've never
Florida
heard
education.
of it.
Just kidding. All right. So in 1835, right? So this is right before. This is what I'm talking about right now. Is actually what sparks the Second Seminole War, which is like the big one. The tensions were getting really hot and really between the Seminoles and the U.S. government, right? They had just passed the act where they were shipping them off to Oklahoma. Some of the Seminoles who signed it had no problem with it. A lot of the Seminoles who were like, that guy doesn't represent me, refused to go. The ground zero for this, for all this tension, was in Ocala at Fort King. Fort King was built as a way to kind of reinforce the Native American relocation area, the Seminole relocation building, which was across the street. Things were getting really bad, and so it's like, we have to reinforce this, we have to protect it. So they called up 100 troops to come from Fort Brooks, which is near Tampa, down what was then called Kings Road, all the way up to Ocala. So probably pretty close to where we are right now. Over the next few days, they started making their trek, but when they went to cross bridges, things were knocked down. It was pretty much just like a little footpath through the swamp, and so the going was really tough. When they got to what is now Bushnell, Florida, they were attacked by a tribe a dispatch of Native Americans, of Seminoles, right? And over the next couple hours, the Seminoles were able to kill 100 of the 103 American soldiers who were marching on Kings Road, right? Every year in January, they do a reenactment of it. It's absolutely amazing. They honor both sides. They honor the American side, but then also the Seminole side. Only 3 people escaped, right? One of them's name was Ransom Clark. He's probably the most famous. Him and another guy escaped, and they were like, hey, let's split them up. You go left, and I'll go right. And they all went after the other guy. The other guy was named by James Spragg, who was an illiterate who basically spent his entire adulthood like rejoining as a private, rejoining as a private, rejoining as a private. He actually went the opposite way, so he went back to Fort Brooks, and a few days later, he arrived safely there and he told his story. This is historical fact. We have the diaries of the soldiers who were on the road. Every year they reenact it. This is 100% what actually happened. Except for that's not the story that some of the Seminoles tell. Instead, they say that those 102 out of the 103 people that made that march, that made Dade's march up the coast, they were killed by the Stachini. The Stachini are Seminole, witch, owl, vampires.
Nice!
Talk about taking everything that's creepy and just kind of slamming it all together and blending it, right?
I just call it awesome.
So the story goes that there is this goddess who's called She Who Walks the Circle, right? And there was a Seminole woman whose her husband had been killed by some Americans, and she called upon the She Who Walks the Circle to avenge them, to give me some kind of supernatural power so I can avenge their death. And so she turned her into this like vengeful monster, kind of like a vengeful demon in Buffy. And she exacted her revenge. Only then she was like, well, you know what? There was this guy that broke up with me. He kind of needs some vengeance too, right?
Oh, come on.
Because the goddess knew when she gave people this power, it corrupts them, right? And so this woman wouldn't stop. She wouldn't give the power back. She just started extracting revenge and getting, revenge on all these different people who had done her wrong. And every single time she cast one of the spells or used some of this power, it took away a little bit more of her humanity. And a little bit more of her humanity until she became a Stikini. Until she became this gigantic owl vampire. Now, Florida, I guess, must have a lot of men who do women wrong, because there was actually an entire coven she was able to find near the Ocala National Forest.
Oh boy.
Wow.
So, the story goes, those men left Fort Brooks in Tampa on their way to Fort King in Ocala. And by day, they started seeing these beautiful women in the forest. And they would be like, right? The first night they were out, when they woke up, 3 of the soldiers had disappeared. And they're like, well, okay, maybe there was something wrong, maybe they just deserted, something like that. So they just kept walking, and the next night, 5 more had disappeared. But this time, they found some of their equipment and some of their jackets, and they were covered in blood.
Oh.
Next day, they start seeing more and more of those beautiful women in the woods. But now those women are not just watching them, they're not just stalking them, they're asking them to come deeper into the woods. And a few of the men, they start kind of walking mesmerized into the woods, and they're never seen again. And then the next night, 10 more people die from the camp. They never are seen again. By now, people are starting to say, this is not the King's Road, this is the Cursed Road, right? This is something like, there's obviously something stalking us. And so they start to get more scared, they start to sleep in groups with their backs turned, and yet still, every single night, more and more people are killed.
Oh,
James Sprague completely freaks out, right? He's like, I'm not gonna die like this is not worth it. He abandons the camp, he goes AWOL, right? Everyone's walking during the day, and he's like, yeah, I'm with you, and then he just kind of starts walking backwards. He escapes, and he's walking through the woods, he's following the same path back. The sun sets, he starts hearing all these strange noises in the woods, so he decides he's gonna go into the woods and hide. And instead he comes upon the coven, and they are completely transformed into their owl state. And he sees them. There's 3 of them. They're around a cauldron. He can see the dead bodies of the soldiers that he knew, his friends that he had been marching with, all around, and they had been completely gutted, and their insides were inside the cauldron being boiled for a nice soup.
Nice.
For my younger kids, good soup, right? So, none of the people make it to Fort King, right? They're all massacred. None of them make it past the town of what is now known as Bushnell. If you ask the history books, the history will tell you one day it was one event. If you ask the Seminoles, they'll tell you it was the Stikini. Wiped them out 1 by 1, 2 by 2, and made soup out of them. But the interesting thing is, people in the area still talk about seeing this Stikini, right? As I was writing my book, Haunted Ocala, I put something out there on Facebook being like, hey, does anyone have any stories? I had to eventually shut the post down. I was getting so many responses from people who had weird things happen. I kept getting story after story after story about people who would be driving, or they would be boating, sometimes in the swamp, and all the power in their car would go out, or all the power in their boat would go out, or their ATVs would just malfunction. The entire area would turn completely black, so even the stars seemed to disappear, and they would hear the screeching of what sounded like an owl. and then they would start to have these smashes and these bangs happen, and then they would be stuck there all night. And when they would get out at the end of the day, like they would get out the next day, when the things kind of finally stopped, they would find these 3 scratch marks on their car, or these 3 scratch marks on the boat, and they had no idea what it was. I have no idea what it was, but she looks like a pretty good candidate. So that's the way it kind of goes, right? Like we have these stories, we have those instances like your boat stalling, and then all of a sudden you're being stalked by something in the woods, and then afterwards something happens, right? Or you're on a stretch of road and you see this mysterious figure who seems to be calling you into the woods, right? These kind of stories happen time and time again. They're part of the mythology, they're part of the folklore, they're part of the fabric of this country. And so, think about this next time you're in this area and it's 3 a.m. and you're in a deserted part of the road and you hear something happening in the woods, whether it's a screeching or whether it's a little kid asking you to come help them, be careful because you might be part of the legends that kind of move Florida's ghost stories along. Does anyone have a story that they want to share or any questions for me or anything like that?
I was going to say, if you end up meeting a Stakini, can you befriend one?
Okay, so here's the deal. The Stakini, or you're a good man. There are good men.
Hey!
The stories the Stakini really stick to, for the most part, it's supposed to be a curse. It's kind of a curse type thing that they stick to men who have done women wrong. And they will only attack that. Now, what their standard for what a man did them wrong is, I'm just saying there might have been a time or two that I didn't return those text messages, and maybe that's what warrants a Stakini attack, I don't know. And do you want to chance it? So yes, just pretend you're a woman, I guess, if you want to befriend.
Although supposedly my mom, we have a house back in Crystal River. My mom says that the ghost of her grandpa is moving stuff around just to mess with.
Yeah, and that's kind of like we all I think have our own mythologies that we create, right? Like so my mother passed away the day before Christmas this year, like last year, and so I have this adorable. She's a granny. She's my sister's grandchild. That's crazy, right? And she's the most adorable thing. And she was out there like playing with the chickens or whatever, and there's this like glow around her. And my sister sends me the picture and she's like, "Do you think that's our mom?" And I'm like, "Or it's the camera and it's noontime." And there's, you know? But I think we have these things that are unexplained and we say, "Oh, that's probably my dad," because, or you smell something and it's just a random smell, but your brain connects it to cigar smoke, so you think it's your grandmother who used to smoke cigars outside because, you know, Grandpa wouldn't let her smoke it inside.
Yeah,
so
my mom smells that sometimes and she thinks, "Is something burning?" I go outside, look outside, nothing's burning.
There you go. So, and a lot of that stuff happens. Does anyone else have any questions or anything they want to...
Could you possibly befriend the black-eyed kids?
That's
Are you
probably...
really that desperate for a friend? Yeah, no, I mean...
There's
like,
people in here that can be friends.
if you, I know. Have you met this kid? Because you guys might be able to... it's one of those things where there are better choices for friends.
Well, you said they'll just get in your car, so...
It's interesting. That stretch of... So I'm going to make a serious thing out of it. That stretch of road, whatever is popular in the paranormal, finds its way to Tiger Trail Road, right? So Shadow Men with Hats was not popular 5 years ago. That movie comes out, that becomes a paranormal trend, all of a sudden they're there. 15 years ago, you didn't have stories of black-eyed kids, that's when they started getting popular. Then all of a sudden, the ghost hitchhikers that were on that road became black-eyed kids, so. It is one of those places, like these trends happen in the paranormal, and as a folklorist, I see these different places that were haunted by one thing, get haunted by something completely different. Same backstory, but now it's a woman in white instead of a this. So it's
Although I'm wondering also, Coyote Woman plus Hungry Howie's equals friend? No, seriously, we got some pretty good pizza down here in Hungry Howie's in Crystal River.
Just plug Rosewood, Florida into your GPS and tell us how it works.
We'll go down together.
Anybody else?
Try that.
Anybody else? So I've been here all day. I'm over there and you might be tempted to buy a book, which is completely fine if you want to buy a book. But if you come, I've got a whole bunch of different things all on my table that have to do with ghostly legends of trapped in Florida. So you can pick something up and say, "What's the story behind this?" And you can get more stories. So
I have a question.
yeah.
because, you know, we're both from New England, where
Yeah.
everything's 200 years old, and so it's sort of logical that everything's haunted. But down here, everything's kind of new. I mean, do you find it's a
Yeah, like St.
different-
Augustine, like that only predates New England by 150 years.
Well, I mean, you
No,
know
no.
what I mean.
No, what I say is this,
It's
right?
like there's 100 haunted houses in New Hampshire.
Yeah, it's so what I found was this: when I came down here from New England, I was really stretched to find stuff, right? Like it was like, oh my word, but that's because I was in Lee County, where no one is from Lee County, right? Like everyone is from a different state. A lot of people from Michigan, Ohio, Canada, right? And what I found is this: there are two different kinds of Central Florida. There's Central Florida this way, and then there's Central Florida this way. So I always say a ghostly legend and a ghost story has to be generational. Think of that kid walking down the path with his grandfather, and his grandfather tells a story from his, and it's been passed down, passed down, passed down, and so it's time to develop and nurture. And so those mysterious things that happen everywhere kind of need a story for us to really engage them. So what happens is if you get off the coast, Tampa's good, right? And St. Pete, Tampa and St. Pete have a ton of things going on, and obviously on the East Coast, the same kind of thing. But those ghost stories that are happening in the Central Florida, this part of the state, right? All of those old railroad towns that are nothing more than ruins anymore, all those places where there have been like 5 or 6 generations have lived in off of Arbuckle Creek, in these weird places that you don't even know of. That's where the ghost stories are. And for them, it has been hundreds of years that they've been there.
Brooksville too.
Wait a second.
Brooksville has quite a few.
So, the book that I'm working on right now is about the town of Pemberton Ferry. How many of you guys have been to Pemberton Ferry? All of you just don't know it because it's not there anymore. It's literally right across the river from Brooksville. And one of the things of my book, it's one ghost story told with 27 distractions, right? Because to tell the story, I have to tell this story and this story. One of it is it's the sister city of Brooksville. Brooksville succeeds, Pemberton Ferry fails. Brooksville loves its ghost stories, right? Sumner County, they don't talk about their ghosts.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's literally a body of water that separates them. Their paranormal opinions are completely different. One fails, one succeeds. Connection there? So, yes, Brooksville is crazy haunted. So, excellent. Thank you guys very much for coming.
Once again, don't forget your raffle tickets out on the way out. Chris will give you 2 for coming to this. And don't forget our vendor in the parking lot that's selling snacks and ice cream and drinks.
And if you win, I get half of whatever you win because you can't see me.